welcome to the debate. Today we're taking a sledgehammer to some of the most enduring, terrifying, and frankly confusing structures in the human imagination. We are talking about Satan, hell, and the final judgment. But we aren't looking at them through the lens of, medieval paintings or pitchforks or Dante's Inferno. We are swapping the mythology for physics.
Which is a bold move. I imagine for some of our listeners, it's a potentially heretical one. Essentially, what we're asking is if these ancient concepts are describing a kind of cosmic soap opera, a war between rival spirits, or if they're actually describing a law-governed ontology. Is judgment a battle, or is it just math?
Right. The central question we need to get at is this. Is the universe run by a drama, or is it run by an equation? And I'm taking the position that the source material describes a strictly lawful system. I'm going to argue that Satan is a functional role, not a proper noun, and that hell is a necessary correction geometry, best understood through, thermodynamics and information conservation.
And I, of course, am taking the skeptical view. While I admit the physics metaphors are clever, and I know you love your physics metaphors, I do worry that when you strip the personhood away from the devil and turn hell into an equation about heat dissipation, you lose the moral gravity of the text. You really risk turning a profound human tragedy into a sterile calculation.
I actually think the calculation makes it more terrifying, not less. But let's lay out our positions before we get too deep into the weeds.
Go ahead. Make your case.
Okay, so my position is that the core error in a lot of popular theology is it's really grammatical. When people read the source material, they see terms like Satan or angel, adversary, and they assume these are personal names like Steve or Mary. But the text, it doesn't support that. These are predicate nominatives. They describe a function, not an identity.
Okay, so for the non-grammarians listening, and I count myself among them sometimes, you mean it's like calling someone the baker or the prosecutor?
Exactly. A predicate nominative cannot be a person. It's a role that's inhabited by a person or an entity. You are the person, the prosecutor is the office you hold. My argument is that Scripture judges offices, not these ontological rivals. The ego self, what the New Testament calls the flesh, is a false equation. It claims to have gravity and authority it doesn't possess. Judgment isn't a war against a rival king, it's just the system correcting a math error.
Okay, I see the logic, but here is where I step off the train. I appreciate the grammatical precision, I really do. But there is a danger in reducing evil to just a function. The text describes active, intelligent malice, if he is personal. And if we remove the personal aspect of the adversary, we create a vacuum where the villain used to be. And furthermore, there's the issue of transactional power. The whole cultural weight of selling your soul, that implies a buyer. If Satan is just a role, who's buying?
Nobody. And that's the real tragedy.
Right, well, we'll get to that. My other concern is your thermodynamic analogy for hell. Treating it as entropy or, energy dissipation, it feels like a way to sanitize the horror. The text speaks of weeping and gnashing of teeth, not a hard drive reformatting. I'm arguing that the personal interaction, even if it's adversarial, is essential to the meaning of the text.
Fair enough. Let's dig into that first point then, the definition of Satan. You're hung up on the personal nature of the evil. You feel like if we call it a function, we're saying it's not dangerous.
I'm saying the text treats the adversary as a distinct intelligence, not just some glitch in the system.
Okay, let me point you to a specific moment in the source material. Matthew 16. Jesus is talking to Peter, his closest friend, and Peter tries to talk Jesus out of going to the cross, effectively trying to stop the entire mission. Jesus looks Peter in the eye and says, "Get behind me, Satan."
Right. A famous verse.
Now look at that closely. Did Peter suddenly morph into a fallen angel with bat wings? Did he cease to be Peter?
Well, obviously not. It was a rhetorical device. He was acting like the adversary. I'd go further than rhetorical. I'd say it was a functional identification. In that moment, Peter was occupying the office of the Satan. The word Satan literally means the accuser or the adversary. It's a job title in a courtroom. Peter stepped into the role of opposing the divine will. The grammar holds. Peter was the person. Satan was the predicate describing his function.
Okay. So you're saying Satan is a hat, and basically anyone can wear it.
Essentially, yes. Whether it's a fallen spiritual entity or a human being, if you obstruct the flow of truth, if you stand in the way of the necessary evolution of the soul, you are functioning as the Satan. And here's why this matters for your transactional question. Because Satan is a role and not a rival creator. The role has no assets. It has no capital.
Meaning?
Meaning the Satan cannot buy souls. It cannot own souls. It cannot sentence souls. Those claims just collapse under both theology and law. I mean, think about it. If you go to a bank and try to sell your house to the concept of theft, the transaction can't clear. There's no counterparty with legal standing.
But that phrase, selling your soul, it's foundational to how we understand evil. It's the Faustian bargain. If there is no buyer, what is happening? Why does it feel so real to people?
It feels real because the loss is real, but it's a swindle, a soliloquy of error, as I sometimes call it. The source material indicates that what we call selling a soul is actually just voluntary misalignment. It's idolatry. You are aligning your internal governance, your mind, your will, your attention, with a false organizing principle. You aren't sold to a master, you're enslaved to a lie.
So it's not a transfer of ownership, it's a self-imposed delusion?
Yes, you are claiming allegiance to a flag that doesn't fly over any actual territory. The devil represents the projection of the false ego, and the New Testament countermeasure is Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live. The ego self must die so that the system can function truthfully.
That is, functionally coherent, I'll give you that. It certainly makes the tragedy more pathetic. Instead of some grand bargain with a prince of darkness, it's just a man shouting orders in an empty room, thinking he's a king.
Exactly. It strips all the glamour away from evil. There is no romance in it. It's just an error code looping on a screen.
But let's pivot to the consequences of that error. Because even if the room is empty, the house is on fire. Let's talk about hell. If we strip away the sadistic dungeon master image, which I agree is a caricature, we are left with what you call correction geometry. But the source material is violent, my friend. It speaks of fire. It speaks of destruction. If this isn't revenge, why is the interface so destructive?
Okay, this brings us to the thermodynamic argument. To understand the fire, we have to look at physics, specifically at Landauer's principle.
Right. Break that down for us. Assume I didn't major in thermal physics.
Okay, think about your computer, or even your brain. Landauer's principle connects information theory to thermodynamics. It states that erasing information is a dissipative process. It generates heat. You cannot delete a bit of information, you can't reset a 1 to a 0 without releasing a specific amount of energy into the environment.
So deletion creates heat. It's a physical cost.
Always. Entropy increases. Now apply this to the soul. Suppose the ego self, that false identity we build up, the one that says, I am the center of the universe, I am my own God, is a complex structure of erroneous information. It's false code.
A glitch in the system. But a glitch that thinks it's the operating system.
A massive glitch, exactly. Now, if the universe is a truth-governed system, it has to correct that error. It has to delete the false code. But here's the catch. The file is the soul, your psyche, your consciousness. The glitch is the rebellion written onto that file.
I think I see where you're going. To wipe the glitch,
You generate heat. Hell is not sadism. It is the thermal cost of deleting false code without deleting the file. The fire described in the texts is the metabolic heat of correction. It's the friction generated when a lie is rubbed against the truth until the lie just disintegrates.
that is an incredibly tidy explanation. It turns God's wrath into system maintenance. But does it actually fit the text? The source material says, "Fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." You were talking about saving the file, but the text speaks of destruction. That sounds like formatting the drive, not just deleting a corrupted app.
That's a crucial distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up. We have to look at the Greek word used for destruction there, which is apolesai. And in a legal or systemic sense, this often means the termination of a configuration or the removal of a capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean the erasure of existence.
Give me an analogy, because destroy usually means gone.
Okay. If I destroy a building, the atoms are still there, the mass is conserved, but the structure, the configuration that made it a building, that's gone. It's a pile of rubble. The self that is destroyed in hell is the false egoic construct that insists on autonomy. The construct is the target of the fire.
So you are distinguishing between the person, the observer, and the construct, the personality or ego they built.
Yes. The person is the observer of the fire. The suffering comes because we identify so strongly with the construct. We think we are the building. So when the building burns, it feels like we are dying.
I think that distinction is philosophically sound, but experientially, it's terrifying. To the individual undergoing this thermal correction, the distinction is purely academic. The pain is absolute. You're describing a process where everything I think makes me gets burned away.
Oh, it's definitely not safe. I'm not arguing for a gentle hell. I'm arguing for a lawful one. And that leads to the other physics concept we need to discuss. Singularities.
Right, you mentioned this in the intro. You view judgment as a kind of black hole?
It's the best analogy we have for a law-governed ontology. In physics, a black hole singularity is a point where incompatible equations collapse. You have general relativity, the geometry of space-time, and you have quantum mechanics. They work fine apart, but at the center of a black hole, they just clash. The math breaks down.
And you were mapping this onto moral judgment?
Perfectly. The ego is a false equation. It claims to be an independent mass. It says, I have my own gravity. But truth, God, reality, the law, is the governing equation of the universe. When the ego meets truth, those equations are incompatible. They cannot coexist. Judgment is the singularity where the system forces a resolution. The false equation must stop computing.
But if the system is so efficient, if the laws of this spiritual physics are so absolute, why are we sitting here having a conversation? Why do we have history? Why doesn't the singularity happen the moment a false equation is generated?
That is the million-dollar question. If this is physics, the reaction should be instant.
Exactly. A hot stove doesn't wait 10 years to burn you. So why the delay?
The answer, I think, lies in what I call sequential submission. If every knee bowed simultaneously, if every false equation resolved instantly, reality would just collapse into a static singularity. There would be no history, no distinction, no growth. Time itself would lose all meaning.
So the delay is for us?
The delay is existence. Submission has to be phased. Think of a black hole's event horizon versus the singularity at the center. Some people yield it grace. That's the event horizon. They see the gravity of truth, they recognize they can't escape, and they submit voluntarily before the crush.
They stop fighting the gravity.
Right, they let go. But others, the obstinate, as the text calls them, they drive right past all the warning signs. They require judgment, the high-gravity region inside the horizon.
That paints a picture of hell not as a separate dungeon created by an angry god, but as a region of high gravity where resistance is processed.
Precisely. It creates a localized region where resistance is slowed, isolated, and resolved, without destabilizing the rest of creation. It preserves temporal coherence. It allows the story to unfold while still guaranteeing the ending.
Okay, let's talk about that ending, because this is where your theory faces its biggest hurdle, I think. You mentioned restoration. In a black hole, information is theoretically conserved, but it's scrambled. It's unreadable. Does the person actually survive this process in a meaningful way, or are they just recycled energy?
The source material is adamant that God is the ultimate accountant. No information is lost, no coordinate is discarded. Remember the distinction I made earlier?
The role versus the person.
The role of opposition, the Satan function, the false ego, is condemned and deleted. It does not survive the singularity. But the individual coordinate, the person, is preserved.
That brings us to that famous text in Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Usually people put that on coffee mugs to feel better about a bad day at work. But if your theory holds, that promise has to coexist with the existence of hell.
It does more than coexist. It requires it.
That's a paradox. How does a promise to not harm require a fire of correction?
Because if the promise is universal, and the text implies the Creator's intent is universal, then judgment becomes the mechanism that makes renewal unavoidable for those who refuse the invitation. Look at it this way. Grace says, "Die with me and live." It invites the voluntary death of the ego. Judgment says, "The false self cannot exist." It enforces the death of the ego.
So they are two mechanisms achieving the same goal?
Both arrive at the same truth, the termination of the ego construct. The outcome for the person is renewal, but the path for the obstinate is the fire.
So you are suggesting that hell is, in a very strange way, an expression of the promise? That because God refuses to abandon the coordinate, he must burn away the interference?
Precisely. It preserves grace, love, hope, and joy by ensuring that the obstacles to them are removed. If God allowed the false self to persist forever, he would be abandoning the person to a lie, and that would not be love. That would be neglect. Judgment is the refusal to negotiate with the cancer that is killing the patient.
It forces me to reconsider the concept of divine mercy. We usually think of mercy as letting someone off the hook. You're describing mercy as refusing to let them stay on the hook, even if getting off requires a very painful extraction.
That's a great way to put it. Mercy is the relentless pursuit of the person behind the mask.
I have to admit, that effectively debunks the deal with the devil myth we started with. If the devil is a role that gets deleted, you can't really make a binding contract with it.
You can't. The devil has no pen to sign with.
So the jurisdictional transfer you spoke of, moving from the false government to the true one, that seems to be the only actual transaction available.
And that transfer is the essence of the good news in the material. The system closes cleanly. Satan is a role that cannot survive truth. Hell is a correction geometry. The end state is equilibrium. The soul agrees with the math of existence.
It is a fascinating synthesis. It replaces the capricious emotional monarch with an immutable law.
And in doing so, I believe it offers a more robust hope. A hope based on the structure of reality, not just a mood.
All right, let's move to our conclusions, because I think we have outlined the shape of this geometry effectively.
Please lead us off.
Reflecting on this thermodynamic framework, I am struck by its intellectual elegance. Viewing hell as the thermal signature of error correction effectively removes the problem of divine sadism. It answers the atheist's objection that a loving God wouldn't torture people. If the suffering is the friction of our own resistance, while the blame shifts entirely to the false equation we're holding on to.
Right. It personalizes the responsibility while depersonalizing the punishment.
However, and I must note, this doesn't make it safe. In fact, replacing an angry deity with an inescapable law of ontology is in some ways more terrifying. You can plead with a king, you might catch him on a good day. You cannot bargain with gravity, you cannot negotiate with a black hole. This view presents a reality check that is absolute. It suggests that truth is a consuming fire, not metaphorically, but structurally.
That is a profound observation. My conclusion aligns with that. This view moves us from a mythic drama to a law-governed ontology. And that is a necessary maturation for faith, I think. We stop looking for horned beasts and start looking at our own internal governance. The fire is real, but it is corrective. The suffering is real, but it's the friction of realignment.
And the outcome?
The most important takeaway for me is that the system is closed cleanly. There are no loose ends in the universe. Satan is a role that cannot survive. The person is a coordinate that cannot be lost. The end state is not a crowded torture chamber, but an equilibrium where the soul finally agrees with the math of existence. The ego has no mass left to resist, and the law completes what love began.
It seems we agree that the material presents a vision where truth does not negotiate with falsehood.
Yet it preserves the person through the destruction of the role.
A rigorous, if scorching, hope.
Indeed. Thank you for listening to The Debate.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We are doing something today that Honestly, I was a little hesitant to even put on the schedule. It feels, well, dangerous is maybe too dramatic a word.
I think volatile is a good word for it.
Volatile, yes.
We're handling materials that don't usually go in the same container at all.
Right. Usually when we do a deep dive, we're looking at, a specific industry or a historical event or maybe a piece of new tech.
Yeah.
But today we are taking two massive, ancient, and usually opposing framework, theology and theoretical physics,
Okay.
and we are smashing them together at high speed.
We're running a collision experiment.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
basically asking, what happens if you run the Bible through a supercomputer simulation based on, of all things, thermodynamics?
It's a collision, for sure. And the source material we're looking at is, it's dense. It's very ambitious. The main text is titled The Thermodynamic Geometry of Divine Judgment.
Just the title alone tells you you're in for a ride.
And there's a companion analysis that helps unpack it called Anthropic Claude's Discernment.
And before we get into the weeds, and believe me, there are a lot of weeds, I want to set the stage for you, the listener, because this is not your standard science and religion talk.
No.
This isn't someone trying to vaguely say, oh, maybe the Big Bang was God. This is way, way more specific.
It's granular. The source text is arguing for a hard pivot from what it calls mythic cosmology to law-governed ontology.
Okay, those are the key terms for today. We have to define those right now because the whole argument hangs on them. So, mythic cosmology, what does the text mean by that?
Mythic cosmology is the world of stories. It's a narrative-driven universe. You have heroes, you have villains, monsters, supernatural beings making arbitrary decisions. It's Zeus getting angry and throwing a lightning bolt because he, woke up on the wrong side of the bed.
Or, in the context we're discussing today, it's the idea of a god who gets mad, who loses his temper, and decides to torture people in a dungeon called hell because they broke his rules. It's personal. It's emotional.
Exactly. That is the mythic view. It's based on personality and whims. The source argues that this is fundamentally the wrong way to read Scripture. It pushes instead for law-governed ontology.
Law-governed ontology. So a universe of rules, not moods.
Precisely. This suggests that spiritual realities, good, evil, judgment, hell, they are not emotional reactions from a deity. They are structural necessities. They are, and this is the core claim, they are math.
Math. That's the word that it stopped me in my tracks when I first read this. The idea that hell isn't a dungeon built by a cosmic warden, but a necessary mathematical result of information theory.
Right. So here's the hook for today's entire deep dive. Just imagine for a second, if hell wasn't about punishment, what if it was about physics?
What if it was just a byproduct of a calculation?
Exactly. Specifically, the physics of deleting information.
We're going to get to that. And trust me, when we get to the section on hell is heat, it changes everything. But we can't start there. We have to build a foundation first. And surprisingly, the foundation of this entire physics argument isn't an equation.
No, it's grammar.
It's 8th grade English class.
It always starts with language.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get the definitions wrong at the start, the math will never, ever work.
So the source opens with a claim that I think is going to upset a lot of people, or at the very least confuse them. It argues that the word Satan is not a proper name.
Correct. It argues it's not a proper noun.
Now, hold on. Because I, like most people, grew up seeing the red horns, the pitchfork, the specific character in a movie. You read the Bible, you see Satan talking, tempting, arguing with God. That sounds an awful lot like a person to me.
It does. I get the confusion.
So how can the source possibly claim Satan isn't a person?
This is where we have to put on our linguist hats for a moment.
Yeah.
The source isn't saying that there aren't entities or beings involved in these stories. It's making a very specific argument about the grammar of the word itself.
Okay.
It argues that Satan, along with words like angel or devil or adversary, are what are called functional predicates. They are not proper nouns.
Okay. Functional predicate. That sounds like a term I definitely failed on a test once. Break that down for us.
Let's use a really simple modern example. Let's say you have a neighbor named Steve. Steve is his proper noun. It refers to his specific essence, his personhood, right?
Steve is Steve.
But let's say Steve is a plumber. The word plumber is a predicate nominative. It's a functional predicate. It describes his role. It describes what he does. It's his job title.
Okay, I follow that. Steve is the guy. Plumber is the job.
Now imagine if I started talking about the plumber as if it were a specific species of creature from another dimension. The plumber is coming to get you. The plumber hates wet floors. I made a deal with the plumber.
I'd be making a category error. I'd be confusing the role with the person.
Precisely. You can stop being a plumber, you can retire, someone else can be a plumber, the role can be filled or emptied. But Steve is still Steve. The role is not the person.
So the source is arguing that Satan is the job title. It's not the name on the employee's name tag.
Exactly. The Hebrew as Satan literally translates to the accuser or the adversary. It is a function. It's a role in what appears to be a cosmic judicial system. The source argues that a predicate nominative, a job title, cannot instantiate personhood.
Meaning the job title can't just come to life and walk around on its own.
Right. You can be an adversary. A person or an angel or any being can choose to inhabit that role, but you cannot be an ontological adversary being, as if the universe created a species called adversaries.
The universe creates beings who might choose to act as adversaries.
That's the critical distinction. It's a choice, a performance, not an identity baked into your DNA.
That feels like a very subtle, technical point of grammar, though. Does it actually change how we read the text in a meaningful way?
Oh, it changes everything. The entire cosmic drama pivots on this single point, and the source gives a devastatingly clear example to prove it.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Think about the moment in the Gospels where Peter, the disciple Peter, Jesus' right-hand man, is trying to talk Jesus out of going to the cross. He's trying to protect him.
Right, the get behind me moment. I remember that.
Jesus turns to Peter, his friend, his most loyal disciple, and says, "Get behind me, Satan."
Okay. Now, in the traditional mythic view, where Satan is a specific arch-villain, a rival god, that sentence is completely bizarre.
It makes no sense. Did Peter get possessed by a demon for 5 seconds? Did he physically morph into the devil and then change back? If Satan is a proper name like Steve, then Jesus is either calling Peter by the wrong name, or he's saying Peter has ontologically become a different creature.
Which seems unlikely.
But if we use the law-governed view, where Satan is a functional role, it's perfectly logically clear. Jesus is identifying the function Peter's performing in that exact moment.
Peter is acting as the adversary.
He is blocking the path, he is obstructing the divine will, he is performing the function of the accuser, the obstructor. So Jesus addresses the role, not the man. He's saying, "Get behind me, obstruction."
He isn't condemning Peter the person to hell.
No. He's identifying the glitch in Peter's current behavior and telling it to get out of the way. He's debugging his friend in real time.
The source also compares this to positive roles, doesn't it? Like, you are the salt of the earth.
Yes, that's the other side of the coin. It shows consistency in the language. If Jesus says you are salt, he doesn't mean you have literally turned into a crystal of sodium chloride.
Right, it's a function. My role is to be a preservative agent in the world.
Or you are light. You're performing the function of illumination. So logically, when he says to Peter, "You are Satan," he means you are currently performing the function of opposition. It's consistent.
This shift from person to role, it seems to be the absolute key that unlocks the rest of this entire argument.
It is, because it means the universe is not a battlefield between two roughly equal gods. A good god versus a bad god.
It's not a cosmic boxing match.
No, it's a system. And in this system, God is the architect, the source code, the fundamental law of reality. And Satan is a malfunction. It's a bug in the code, a system error.
And you don't negotiate with a bug. You don't make deals with a system error.
You fix it, or you delete it. Which brings us to the next section, the legal implications. Because if Satan is just a malfunction, a role of opposition, then that creates a massive, massive problem for the whole selling your soul industry.
Oh, I love this section. Because we all know this trope. It's in every blues song, every horror movie. You go to the crossroads at midnight.
She signed the contract in blood.
And you get incredible guitar skills or a pile of money or political power. And in exchange, the devil owns your soul forever.
It's a great story. It's powerful mythology. But the source argues it is folk mythology that completely collapses the moment you apply any kind of actual legal scrutiny to it.
Okay, let's play lawyer here. Let's put this contract on trial. Why is it void?
Well, for any contract of sale to be valid, you need a few basic things. The seller must have the right to transfer the property, and the buyer must have the legal capacity to own it. The source argues that the Satan function fails on every single level of property law.
Okay, let's break that down. First, the seller me. Why can't I sell my soul?
The source asks a very simple question. Did you create you?
No.
Then you don't hold the title deed. You don't hold the copyright to your own existence. In this ontology, you are the property of the primary reality that created you, which the text calls God. You can't sell what you don't own.
So I don't even own myself.
Not in an ultimate sense. You're a derived being. You're like a tenant in a house. You can live in it, you can decorate it, but you can't sell the house to somebody else. You're trying to sell a rental car. You can't transfer the title because the title was never yours.
Okay, that's a problem for my side of the deal. What about the buyer? Why can't the adversary buy my soul?
For a couple of reasons. First is transactional authority. The source says the adversary has no currency that is recognized by the Supreme Court of Reality.
What does that mean? No currency. He offers wealth, power.
But where does he get it from? He has no creative capital. He cannot generate life. He cannot generate matter. He cannot generate reality. All he can do is manipulate what already exists. His currency is illusion. It's lies. And in any lawful court, a contract based on fraud is void ab initio from the very beginning.
So the deal is based on a lie, making it invalid.
And second, he has no judicial authority. He can't enforce the contract. He can't sentence souls. He's the accuser, the prosecutor, not the judge. The source is very clear. The adversary has no creative power, no property rights, and no judicial authority. He is, legally speaking, a nobody with a loud voice.
So if I go to the crossroads, I draw the pentagram, I sign the paper in blood, what happens? Did just nothing happen?
Well, no, not a sale.
Oh.
A legal transaction of ownership does not occur.
Yeah.
But something very important does happen. And this is where the source uses a term I found incredibly useful: jurisdictional transfer.
That sounds like corporate law.
It is, in a way. Think of it like this. The text references a verse from Romans, chapter 6, verse 16. It says, "Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey?"
So it's not about ownership, it's about allegiance. It's about who you obey.
Right. It's about your internal governance. When you sell your soul, you aren't actually transferring the title deed of your existence. God still owns the hardware. What you are doing is voluntarily changing your operating system. You are aligning your will with a false organizing principle.
You're accepting the laws and the jurisdiction of the adversary.
You're choosing to live in a different legal framework.
And what are the laws of that framework? What's the core principle? Chaos, selfishness.
The source boils it down to one thing: autonomy, the delusion of the separate self, the ego self, the core belief that I am the center of the universe.
You know, we got some feedback from listeners on a previous deep dive about main character syndrome.
I remember that.
This sounds exactly like a theological diagnosis of main character syndrome. The idea that I is the protagonist of reality, and every other being is just an NPC, a supporting character in my story.
That is the perfect modern translation. That is the definition of the satanic function in this text. It is the egoic construct that insists on separation from the whole. It's a rebellion against the interconnectedness of reality. It's a delusion.
So if I align myself with that delusion, with that operating system, what happens? If the devil can't actually drag me to his private dungeon, where do I go?
You go to prison, but we have to be incredibly careful with that word.
Because it's not the mythic dungeon with pitchforks.
Right. In this framework, prison isn't a torture chamber designed by a sadist. It is a structural container for an incompatible logic.
Okay, explain that. A structural container.
Let's go back to our legal analogy. Think about a lawful, functioning society. If a man decides he is going to start murdering people, he has aligned his internal governance with a principal murder that is fundamentally incompatible with the functioning of the open society.
Right. The system can't tolerate that.
So the society doesn't put him in prison because it hates him personally or wants to see him suffer. It puts him in prison because his status as an active murderer literally cannot function in the open system without destroying it. The prison is a container for that broken logic.
The prison is the only place where that logic can exist without harming the whole.
Exactly. The source argues that hell is the container for the status of opposition. It is the quarantine zone for the ego self that refuses to integrate with the laws of reality. The text has this chilling line. It says, "The sentence is eternal because the law is eternal. Not because suffering is the goal, but because law does not negotiate with falsehood."
Law does not negotiate with falsehood. Wow. That implies that as long as I am holding on to the lie of my own autonomy, I am stuck in the friction of that lie.
And that word friction, that is the perfect bridge to the next section, because now we have to leave the courtroom and the grammar lesson and go straight into the physics lab. We've established that Satan is a malfunction, and hell is a structural container for that malfunction. But why is it always described as fire? Why the weeping and gnashing of teeth? Why the pain?
This is where the thermodynamic geometry of divine judgment really kicks in. And honestly, this is the part where I need you to really walk us through the science slowly, because the text invokes something called Landauer's principle, and I don't want to just gloss over that. Who was Landauer, and what did he figure out?
Okay, let's go back to 1961. There's a physicist named Rolf Landauer. He's working at IBM, and he's thinking about the absolute physical limits of computing. At the time, there was a huge debate in physics about a famous thought experiment called Maxwell's demon.
Maxwell's demon, right? That's the thought experiment about a tiny little creature who can sort molecules, right?
Exactly. Imagine you have a box full of gas molecules. They're all just bouncing around randomly. Half are hot, meaning they're moving fast, and half are cold, meaning they're slow. If you put a little divider in the middle with a tiny magical door, and a tiny demon operates the door.
Like a bouncer at a nightclub.
A very, very tiny bouncer, and he only opens the door to let the fast, hot molecules go to the right side and the slow, cold molecules to the left. Eventually, you'd have one side of the box that's hot and one side that's cold.
You'd have created order out of chaos.
Without doing any work. You would have violated the second law of thermodynamics. You would have decreased entropy for free.
Which is impossible.
It's the most fundamental law in physics. It's impossible. But for nearly a century, physicists couldn't prove why the demon couldn't do it. Landauer finally provided the answer.
Oh.
He realized the demon has to know which molecules are fast and which are slow. He has to measure them. He has to store that information, even for a split second, in his brain or on a little notepad.
Okay, so he's collecting data.
But his brain, or his memory,
Yeah.
is finite. It has a limited capacity. Eventually, to keep sorting, he runs out of space. He has to erase the old data, that was a fast one, to make room for the new measurement. This is a slow one.
He has to forget things to learn new things.
And Landauer did the math and figured out that the physical act of erasing one bit of information, of resetting a 1 to a 0, is an irreversible process. And because it's irreversible, it must, by the laws of physics, dissipate a minimum amount of energy into the environment as heat.
Wait, hold on. You're saying the act of forgetting, of deleting information, literally generates heat.
Yes, that's the principle. Erasing information has a physical thermodynamic cost. Thinking and processing can, in theory, be done with zero energy. But erasure, the destruction of information, is not free. It generates heat. This is now known as Landauer's limit.
So every time I delete files off my computer or format a hard drive, I am literally physically heating up the universe by a tiny amount.
Yes, by a minuscule amount. But yes, information is physical. It's not a ghost in the machine. It has mass, it has energy, it has a thermodynamic cost.
Okay, my mind is already a little bit blown. Now please connect this to theology, because that is a massive, massive leap.
It's a huge leap, but the source text makes it. It argues that sin, or the ego construct, or the lie of autonomy, is essentially false information. It is a complex algorithmic structure running in the hardware of a soul that claims something untrue about reality.
It's bad code. Corrupted data.
It's an erroneous data packet that says, I am God, or I am separate, or I am the owner of this world. Now, what happens when that piece of erroneous data comes into direct contact with absolute truth? What happens when the system God finally runs a diagnostic and corrects the error?
The error has to be deleted. The false information has to be erased.
And the physical act of erasure generates
Heat.
Precisely. The source text has this incredible line. It says, hell is not sadism. It is the thermodynamic cost of deleting false code without deleting the file.
Wow. Okay, let me sit with that for a second. You're saying the person, the consciousness is the file. The sin, the ego, the rebellion, that's the bad code written into the file.
Yes.
And the fire of hell is the literal energy, the heat, that is released when the truth of reality forcibly rips that bad code out of the file.
That is the core of the thermodynamic argument. It completely reframes the nature of the suffering. The source doesn't deny the pain. The weeping and gnashing of teeth are real. But it identifies the source of the pain. It's not God actively torturing you for revenge. It is the metabolic heat of your own correction.
It's the friction.
It's the friction of your lies being dragged across the infinitely hard surface of truth.
It's like, okay, imagine you have a bone that healed wrong. It's crooked. To fix it, a surgeon has to re-break the bone and set it straight. The pain of that process is intense, but the pain is the mechanism of healing. It's a kind of constructive destruction.
That's a perfect analogy. The ego self is the crooked bone. It has calcified in the wrong direction. Divine judgment in this model is the rebreaking, and that process releases an enormous amount of energy. The text calls it the metabolic heat of correction.
Okay, this is a lot. And it brings us to the next big physics concept the source throws at us, which feels related. The black hole.
Yes. The singularity.
Now, usually when people in theology talk about black holes, they just mean a dark pit you can't escape.
Yeah.
But this source is using it in a much more specific, technical way. It's about incompatible equations.
Exactly. It's using the black hole as a metaphor for a boundary of laws. In physics, a black hole is so fascinating because it's the one place in the universe where our two greatest theories of reality break down. It's where general relativity, the laws of big things, gravity, planets, the curvature of space-time crashes headfirst into quantum mechanics, the laws of small things, particles, probability, information.
And those two sets of rules don't get along.
Mathematically, they hate each other. They give contradictory answers. At the singularity, the infinitely dense point at the center of the black hole, our math it breaks. The system forces a resolution that we can't fully describe yet. It's a point of ultimate crisis for physics.
So how does this map onto the soul and judgment?
The source imagines the soul approaching the singularity of divine judgment. And as it approaches, it's carrying two incompatible equations.
Okay.
Equation A is the ego. Its core axiom is, I am the center, I am autonomous. Reality revolves around me. And equation B is God, or truth. Its core axiom is, I am that I am the source of all being, all reality revolves around me.
Those two equations cannot both be true in the same space.
They are mutually exclusive. So as the soul gets closer to the singularity, the unfiltered presence of God, the gravitational pressure of truth increases, and the ego equation simply cannot compute. It's mathematically invalid in that region of space-time. It's like trying to divide by zero.
So it collapses, the system crashes.
It collapses. The false structure is crushed out of existence. But, and this is the most important part of the entire physics section, what happens to the information?
Right. This is the famous black hole information paradox.
Exactly. For a long time, Stephen Hawking famously argued that information that falls into a black hole was destroyed forever, just gone. But quantum mechanics has a sacred rule. Information must be conserved. It's called unitarity.
The information can't just vanish.
Right. If you burn a book, the information in it seems gone. But technically, if you could capture every particle of ash and every photon of light and every bit of heat from the smoke, you could reconstruct the original book. The information isn't gone, it's just transformed and re-encoded in a different state.
So if we apply this principle, the conservation of information, to the soul.
The source argues that God, as the ultimate accountant of the cosmos, never loses a coordinate. He never loses a single bit of data. He never loses a soul.
Even the ones that go into the fire.
Yeah.
Even the ones that fall into the singularity.
Even those. The structure of their rebellion, the bad code, the ego equation that gets burned up, it's the book being burned. But the ash and smoke, the fundamental data of the being, the core consciousness, that remains. It's re-encoded.
This brings us to a specific Bible verse that, honestly, usually scares the living daylights out of people. It's Matthew 10:28. Fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell.
The destroy verse. Yes, yeah. It's the bedrock of the annihilationist view. The idea that God just gets fed up and zaps sinners out of existence.
Poof, you're just gone. Deleted from reality.
But the source, again, puts on its linguist hat and digs into the original Greek word that's used there for destroy. The word is apoleisai.
Okay, what does apoleisai really mean?
Well, it's often translated as destroy, but in common Greek usage at the time, it had a much richer nuance. It often meant to loose, to unbind, or to render inoperative.
So not obliterate, but ruin.
Ruin is a great way to put it. Think about a wineskin that gets old and cracks. It's destroyed as a wineskin. It can no longer perform its function of holding wine, but the leather is still there. Or a ship that is wrecked on the rocks. It's destroyed as a vessel, but the wood is still floating on the water.
So it means ruined for its intended function. It's a functional destruction, not an ontological one.
Precisely. So let's go back to our grammar section from the beginning. We said Satan is a function of opposition. The ego is a structure of rebellion. When divine judgment hits, God destroys, apoleisai, that function. He renders the opposition inoperative.
He breaks the rebellion machine.
He smashes the machine. But the operator of that machine, the consciousness, the person, is unbound from it. They are loosed from the function they were performing.
That sounds incredibly violent, but ultimately hopeful. Like the virus is brutally killed, the computer is reformatted, but the core hardware survives to be rebooted with a new operating system.
It is violent salvation. It's not the gentle, God loves you so he lets you do whatever you want idea. It's a much more fierce, God loves you so much he will relentlessly dismantle the machine that is killing you, even if you scream while he does it.
But this raises a huge, obvious question. The problem of simultaneity. If God is this cosmic supercomputer who can just delete the bad code and save the file, why are we doing this whole history of Earth thing? Why not just fix everyone right now, instantly?
It's the classic, why doesn't God just stop evil question, but upgraded with a physics lens. The source gives a truly mind-bending answer to this. It says, if every knee bowed simultaneously, reality would collapse into a static singularity.
A static singularity. What on earth does that mean?
Think about a story. Any story. A book. A movie. If the hero solves the central problem on page 1, do you have a book?
No. You have a pamphlet, a one-sentence summary.
You have no plot. You have no character development. You have no relationship, no struggle, no victory. The source argues that time itself is essentially the distance between a question and its final answer. If you force the answer instantly and simultaneously for everyone, you delete time, you delete history.
So we need the delay. The process is the point.
We need the sequence, the unfolding. The source calls it sequential submission. It argues that for concepts like love and free will to have any meaning at all, there must be a process of yielding, and that process happens in distinct phases.
Okay, walk us through these phases.
Phase 1 is grace. This is the phase we are supposedly in right now, in this life. It's the opportunity to yield at the event horizon. You see the truth coming, you recognize the gravity of God, and you voluntarily submit. You say, not my will, but yours be done.
You let go of the ego equation before the immense pressure of reality crushes it for you.
Exactly. You die before you die, as many mystics have said. You choose to align with reality. The text frames it as, die with me and live. That's the easy way. The gentle way.
In phase 2, for those who don't take the easy way.
Phase 2 is judgment. This is for those who refuse to yield. They cling to their ego equation. They insist, I am the center. They fly right into the singularity.
They enter the high gravity region we were talking about.
Yes. And in that region, the source says their resistance is slowed, isolated, and resolved. The friction increases exponentially. The thermodynamic heat rises. The hell experience begins. Not because God is turning up a thermostat to punish them, but because their soul is fighting harder and harder against a gravity that is, by definition, infinite.
But the destination of both paths, is it the same?
That is the radical hope embedded in this entire text. It argues that, yes, the destination is the same. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are just different timelines, different paths to the exact same coordinate, the final destruction of the false self and the complete restoration of the true self in alignment with God.
It sounds like it connects to that verse in 2 Peter chapter 3, the one that says, the Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance.
Yes. Most traditional theologies really struggle with that verse. If God doesn't wish for any to perish and he is all-powerful, then why do people perish? Is he weak? Or is he lying about what he wishes? It's a paradox.
But the source says, he's not weak or a liar. He's just deficient.
The source says he is inevitable. It argues that perishing, in the sense of total final loss, isn't on the table. The plan is designed to capture everyone eventually. Some come willingly via the invitation of grace. Some have to be compelled via the subpoena of judgment. But truth is a universal gravitational field. You can't escape it forever.
Invitation versus subpoena.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
It implies the judgment is just mandatory grace for the most stubborn among us.
Or mandatory renewal. It sounds like a paradox, but if the only other option is non-existence, then renewal, even if it's painful, is the only option the system allows.
Okay, so let's talk about the implications of all this. Because if this framework is true, if hell is a hospital for the stubborn and Satan is just a job title that's in the process of being eliminated, it completely changes how we view our own identity and the identities of others.
It creates a massive, uncrossable distinction between who you are at your core and what you are doing in your rebellion.
Let's go back to an analogy you mentioned earlier, the embezzler.
Right. Let's flesh that out a bit more. Imagine a man who has worked at a firm for 20 years. He's a good guy, a family man. But he gets into debt, makes a bad choice, and he becomes an embezzler. He starts stealing millions. That role, the embezzler, begins to consume him. It dictates his actions, his paranoia, his lies, his entire lifestyle.
He starts to believe that he is the embezzler. That's his identity now.
In his own mind, yes. The function has overtaken the person, but then the law comes down, the auditors show up. What happens?
He gets caught.
He gets caught. The law strips him of his position at the company. It seizes the stolen money. It puts him in a prison cell. It completely and utterly destroys the embezzler role. That role is dead. It no longer exists within the company's reality.
The man. the person.
The man sits in the cell. He is stripped of his false identity. He is ashamed. He is weeping and gnashing his teeth because his entire false empire is gone. But he is alive. And now that the embezzler function has been destroyed, the man finally has the chance to be something else, to be who he truly was before the lie took over.
The judgment killed the sin to save the sinner.
Exactly. The source argues that this is the mechanism of the cosmos. God is not interested in throwing the man in the trash can. He is interested in burning the embezzler seat off of him, even if it feels like his own skin is going with it.
This gives a whole new weight, a much heavier weight, to verses like Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you. We usually put that on graduation cards and coffee mugs.
Yeah, it's the ultimate coffee mug verse. But now, apply it to the man in that prison cell. Or apply it to a soul in the furnace of hell.
I know the plans I have for you.
Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope. The source argues that this promise is a universal constant, like gravity. It applies to every single coordinate in creation. Even if you are in the deepest pit of the singularity, the plan is still restoration. The harm you are feeling is the necessary destruction of the very thing that is blocking your prosperity.
That is a tough, tough pill to swallow if you're the one in the fire.
Oh, absolutely. This framework doesn't make the fire hurt any less. It doesn't minimize the agony of correction, but it gives the fire a purpose. It turns suffering from useless, vindictive torture into something more like cosmic chemotherapy.
Chemo makes you feel like you're dying.
But the intent is life.
I want to zoom out for a second. We've covered a ton of ground here. We've gone from grammar to law to thermodynamics to black holes. It feels like someone tried to build a unified theory of spiritual mechanics.
It's an attempt, for sure. It's trying to show that the spiritual world isn't a fairy tale operating on magic. It's a higher dimensional physics operating on law.
And there's one final concept that the source only hints at, but I think it pulls everything we've talked about together.
Yeah.
It's what I've been thinking of as the same energy theory, and I want to leave the listener with this because it's the most provocative part of the whole argument.
It's the idea that heaven and hell are not actually different places.
Right. We are conditioned to think of them as different zip codes. Heaven is up there, the AC is on, there's nice music. Hell is down there in the basement, the furnace is cranked, and there's lots of screaming.
Two totally separate realities. But the source suggests, what if they're the same location? Or rather, what if they are different experiences of the exact same presence?
The presence of absolute truth.
Imagine God not as a person or a king on a throne, but as a star. A sun of pure, unfiltered reality. Infinite information, infinite light, infinite truth.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now imagine two different people standing in the full, unshielded blaze of that star. Person A has spent their life seeking truth. They have humbled themselves. They have let go of their ego construct. Their internal structure has become compatible with the light. They've learned to resonate with it.
So to them, that star, that presence, feels like
Warmth, illumination, joy, love, glory. They are resonant with the energy. That experience is heaven.
Okay, and person B.
Person B has spent their life building a fortress of lies around themselves. They are wrapped in the ego self. They hate the truth because it threatens their autonomy. Their internal structure is fundamentally incompatible with the light. It's oil and water.
So to them, that exact same star, that same energy feels like
Fire, a burning, consuming fire, exposure, agony, judgment.
So it's the same energy from the same source.
The exact same energy. The fire of hell and the light of heaven are the same substance. The only difference isn't in God, who is unchanging. The difference is in you. It's in the state of the object meeting the energy.
That completely reframes the old theological idea that the doors of hell are locked from the inside.
It does. It means you are burning because you are resisting. If you were to stop resisting, if you were to let go of the lie and align your frequency with the source, the fire would instantly become light.
But because, as the source says, law does not negotiate with falsehood, the fire will persist until the resistance ends.
Until the entropy is resolved. Until the false information is completely and finally corrected.
Man, that makes you want to take a serious look at your own internal governance, doesn't it?
It's the ultimate check engine light. Where in my own life am I creating friction with reality? Where am I insisting on a false equation about myself or the world?
Where am I the embezzler in my own story?
Exactly, because this model suggests that eventually the audit is coming for everyone.
Well, on that cheerful but weirdly hopeful note, I think we are going to wrap up. We've gone from predicate nominatives to event horizons. I hope your brain isn't too melted.
Just a little thermodynamic heat. The source says it's good for you.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, maybe take a look at the show notes. We'll try to link some of the core concepts so you can fall down this very strange rabbit hole yourself.
And remember, Landauer's principle applies to your social media posts, too. Be careful what information you create. It all has a cost.
Oh, don't tell them that. They'll never post again. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Take care.